Good evening. I'm Mabel Wilson, and I am the director of the Institute for Research in African American Studies, IRAAS, as well as a professor in our newly formed Department of African American and African Diaspora Studies, what we affectionately now call AAADS, here at Columbia University. I am speaking this evening on the traditional land and unceded territory of the Lenape. I pay respect to their diaspora and honor the past, present, and future presence of the Lenape on their homeland they call Lenapehoking. For the past 28 years, the Institute for Research in African American Studies, founded by the late Professor Manning Marable, has been a fierce advocate of social responsibility in Black studies. The Institute serves as an academic resource center for a local and global community that has cultivated an intellectual tradition grounded in Harlem's rich history and culture. Now in partnership with our new department, AAADS, IRAAS continues to expand the array of contemporary scholarship and interpretation of the diasporic Black experience with ongoing series like tonight's conversation. I want to thank our co-sponsor, the Institute for Comparative Literature and Society. And as always, a special thanks to Sharon Harris and Sean Mendoza for making this evening possible. And I want to welcome you all to tonight's event on JONAH Mixon-Webster's new collection of poetry, Stereotype, in conversation with writer KIESE Laymon. JONAH Mixon-Webster is a poet and a conceptual sound artist from Flint, Michigan. Dr. Mixon-Webster graduated from Eastern Michigan University and received a Ph.D. in creative writing from Illinois State University. We at Columbia and at AAADS are pleased to welcome Dr. Mixon-Webster as our inaugural Mellon postdoctoral fellow this academic year. Now, of his accolades, he is the recipient of the Windham Campbell Prize for Poetry. He has received fellowships from the Vermont Studio Center, the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics, the Conversation Literary Festival, and the Pen Writing for Justice program. His work has appeared in the Yale Review, Callaloo, Harper's Magazine, and Best American Experimental Writing 2018. Stereotype, really amazing book, was published by Alfred Knopf in 2021 and is his debut collection of poems. It was originally published by Ahsahta Press in 2018. Clearly a standout first collection, Stereotype won the Sawtooth Poetry Prize, the Joyce Osterweil Award for Poetry, and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. In an interview, Mixon-Webster shares the blistering truth that, quote, "Stereotype almost killed me to make. It took a lot to have to go to these places literally and figuratively, to go to these places that this stuff comes from. I had to put myself in these precarious positions. I had to follow the stereotype through. I had to sit with a lot of stuff and cry and hurt, mourn and grieve. And I had to find a way out of it then," quote. This is a work that resonates and one that must be heard and felt. Dr. Mixon-Webster is joined tonight by the multi-talented writer KIESE Laymon, who hails from Jackson, Mississippi. Professor Laymon is the author of the groundbreaking collection, How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America, and the genre-defying novel, Long Division. Laymon's best-selling and award-winning memoir, Heavy, an American memoir, won the 2019 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction, the 2018 Christopher Isherwood Prize for Autobiographical Prose, the Austin Riggs Erickson Prize for Excellence in Mental Health Media, and was named one of the 50 best memoirs of the past 50 years by the New York Times. The audiobook Heavy, read by the author, was named Audible 2018 Audiobook of the Year. So you could see this is an incredibly talented evening. So I'm pleased to welcome JONAH Mixon-Webster, who will share something from the book and some of his sound work, and KIESE Laymon in conversation.
Thank you so much for that, Mabel. Thank you, everybody, for coming here. Thank you, KIESE, for joining. KIESE has been one of my biggest inspirations ever since we met. It was like back in like what, 20, I can't remember. When did we meet? Like 2016, something like that. Yeah. It's the first time we ever shared the stage ago. I had to follow you, which wasn't no no easy task at all. So it's always great to to be able to have you here and kind of talk about this stuff. I'm gonna kind of jump into it. Stereotype. Going through this process of trying to kind of reinvigorate it, find these inflection points where the work could expand, it could gain a little bit more nuanced perspectives, and also give me the opportunity to follow through with some traditional forms and modes from the Black literary tradition. So I want to start with the kind of like blues aria that developed in this most recent edition of Stereotype. We're going to hear a few blues pieces that were created in collaboration with vocalist Angie Fisher, flautist Dominique Jordan, and another vocalist who we might know, Danny Boy Stewart, who sang, I ain't mad at you. So they all blessed me with their talents and supported making some of this language come even more to life. Black Contology number 5. Black as if always the blues of a stridulated half note, night gristle, locust chirp, bold neck, wax lips, wet stain, a body thronged hard and buried in the open light. The soul of it, dug up with a mouth stretched, reaching to scratch the noose from its throat and give everyone a song.
Ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't got no way to make it out. Try to find me some help. No, I can't be found. So ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't even got me penny to make a pound. They about took all I had. Who am I now? Well, ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang out. If I could, I'd run right straight out of town. Don't even need me shoes, just feet on the ground. I ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't no news to think about. So I'm telling you later, I'm telling you now. There ain't nothing to do but hang around. Ain't nothing to do but hang around. Now imagine if they never would have cut me down. Say imagine if they never would have cut me down. I would have made it, I'll still be found. Feet on the ground, out of town. Could took a penny and make a pound. Out of water and underground. Said tell it now that I'll still be found. Said I'll still be found. Said I will still be found. Said I'll still be found.
Said I tried to buy some freedom, but the price too high. My chains too low. Had to sell my brother dreams down at the store. Oh, why? And it made me cry. Said I tried to buy some love, but the price too high. My chains too low. Had to sell my mama ring down at the store. Oh, why? And it made me cry. Said I tried to buy some time, but the price too high. And my chains too low. Had to sell my daddy watch down at the store. Oh, why? And it made me cry. Said I tried to buy some peace, but the price too high. And my chains too low. Had to sell my sister beauty down at the store. Oh, why? And it made me cry. Said I tried to buy some hope, but the price too high. And my chains too low. Had to sell my uncle dough down at the store. Oh, why? And it made me cry. Sell my auntie smile down at the store. Oh, why? And it made me cry. Oh, I tried to buy some attention, but the price too high. And my chains too low. Had to sell my cousin mine down at the store. Oh, why? And it made me cry.
Always I was a nigga, bad at it. I was always being a nigga, even when I wasn't. I was a nigga. Somebody's I was always bad at being man, even when I was a nigga. I wasn't. I was bad at being a nigga, though I wasn't. I was bad at being a nigga, even though I was a real nigga or a bad nigga or a bitch nigga or a fag nigga, which I always was, always been bad, always a nigga, though I was bad at it. I was bad, nigga. I was always a bad nigga. Kept me a hot nigga, always a nigga. It's always a damn nigga. It's always a nigga bad at it. And always I was a nigga and always I was bad and bad. And bad. Really, I'm a real nigga. Because all my niggas say I'm a real nigga. And I bet if you go and ask them niggas, they gonna point at me and say, that's a real nigga. Really though, I'm bad at it. I am. Really. Thank you all for being with me, for experiencing this, holding this. Yeah, like just like how Mabel, quoted from that piece. Some of the places that I had to kind of go psychically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, physically, took me to like the deep depths of the blues, and the very interminable project for Black people to always trying to ameliorate or change for the better some of the most extreme, terrible, horrendous conditions ever faced by humankind. And through this kind of process of amelioration, one has to hold both this ambivalence of the true pain, the true torment, and then also the true beauty of striving for more, for striving for better. And the blues form really holds that. I want to jump towards the end of the book, which deals with the Flint water crisis. Thank you, Mama. I see my mama in the comments here. Pull through. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mama. You know I'll be having to get kind of emotional. To get here, it's gonna get a little more emotional, probably. So it was everything going on during the Flint water crisis. There were so many compounding elements besides the lead in the water. I mean, before there was lead in the water, there were pretty much the coliform bacteria, fecal matter, decaying matter. They used to throw dead bodies in the Flint River, which became the source of the city's water supply. All that stuff got piped through to everyone's taps. In addition to that, there were urban military warfare drills that were happening. So pretty much they were dropping bombs, they were testing bombs in the city. In addition to that, there were some psychological warfare things happening. This sound they used to play on the north side of Flint every night, which pretty much, I knew it was a sound installation, you know, to kind of drive people mad, even madder than they were already. This work begins to kind of chronicle some of the things that I witnessed either firsthand or had to witness secondhand because of the fact that I was away right after the Flint water switch happened. So a lot of the writing about Flint was really me trying to be home or go back home, even though I couldn't. This is incubation. It is 2020 and the city of Flint says, don't boil the water. And I refuse to drink a single drop from any tap or bottle now. I've stopped bathing completely, waiting for rain to slick my skin back on. I eat accessory fruits, mainly from cardboard, and cover the rashes on my face with coconut oil to appear more alive. I sit beneath a sun lamp, touching no one. It is 2016 and the city of Flint says, boil the water. My mother lays her head in a couch of her own hair, pulls back a scar from the watermark in her leg, the scalp of her knee giving to the bloody lock. Faucet water hardens into a fang, attacks, slowly unfleshes the body altogether. This week, my niece goes live on Facebook, filming her son running in an errant stupor, bad as he is already, vaulting up an obstacle of leather, a base from which to rehearse flight. He lands, runs onto the carpet, the screech following his shade into the mat. He moves his joints to the finish, muscle where his mind angles the floor. It is 2014 and the city of Flint says, boil the water. My niece, great nephew and I bowl metallic mac and cheese from the aluminum. We all smash it, heavy and wet the taste in the soup of our mouth. TJ plays the last noodle with his finger, consumes it, says, where's the meat? It is 2017 and the city of Flint says, boil the water. I undo the gauze from the stitched together incision below my navel. The procedure, an embolization to loosen the knot of veins growing inside of me. And to clean the wound, I use a room temperature bottle of purified drinking water, more gauze, and a plain bar of antibacterial soap. I apply a small amount of Bactine to the area and stick on a hospital-grade bandage. I press onto it lightly for 10 seconds. It is 2014 and the city of Flint says, don't boil the water. I lie into a nightmare of sound. Again, there is no rest. The whole house and hood is washed in the voice of some agent installed in the park burn projects adjacent to the crib, tucked in the half of an acre. An alarm, a holler on blast every night from 10 p.m. until we all sleep it off. This lasts for a year, despite complaint. Another day starts like this, stretched by the mile of voice, sounding off from the intersection of Pearson and Cloverlawn, throwing itself to the undead, which lay some distance elsewhere. The broke record of it. in the air, in the water, in the dream. Warning, warning. You have violated an area protected by security. The authorities have been notified. Leave immediately. Warning, warning. You have violated an area protected by security. The authorities have been notified. Leave immediately. Warning, 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 warning. You have violated an area protected by security. The authorities have been notified. Leave immediately. Warning, warning. You have violated an area protected by security. The authorities have been notified. Leave immediately. Warning, warning, warning. You have violated an area protected by security. The authorities have been notified. Leave immediately. Warning, you have violated an area protected by security. Leave immediately. You have violated an area protected by security. Warning, warning, warning. You have violated. They are protected by security. If those have been notified, leave immediately, leave immediately, leave immediately, leave immediately, leave immediately, leave. It is 2015 and the city of Flint says, boil the water. I returned to the city for the first time since the story surfaced. Riding through the hood, crossing at the corner of Pearson and DuPont, stands a string of neon stanchions, military servicemen, a gaggle of pallets, a gaggle of bottled waters wishing us well. It is 2018 and the city of Flint says, don't boil the water. Soon, a new narrative, lead exposed as opposed to lead poison. The spin of an incident as accident, a posture to say, well, I guess we were all just a little naive, weren't we? That's counter to, yes, we did this with our full knowing, training and education notwithstanding. Surely you can trust us now. It is 2020 and the city of Flint says, boil the water. Bills, flyers, pamphlets, bags, bills, manuals, mailers, bills, boxes, bills, bottles, bottle caps, bills, a junk flood in the streets, overflowing our houses now. Every piece of litter and literature yelling, consume, consume. It is 2019 and the voice on the radio says, have you or your family been affected by the Flint water crisis? Does your child's blood levels show evidence of lead poisoning? Have you noticed any developmental issues or rashes on your child? If so, you may be eligible to file a claim and receive compensation for you and your child's suffering. Please contact us at the law offices of. It is 2015 and the city of Flint says, boil the water. My boy Q posts a picture of his back bubbling with fissures and an even spread. Having bathed in the city's northeast waters, the contagion carries itself into the host, bearing witness to a feast of skin and other soft metals. Black on black stone under a white stone after Cesar Vallejo. I will die in Flint in the early gloaming of a raid as blood honeys the fetid water. I will die in Flint in a handoff without witness on any night. Perhaps this night, I am found with broadcloth over my teeth, a bagged object in clutch, empty water bottles at my side, a dingy horde of glooms, and whatever else is left of my body will now enter the day rearward. In some nature, JONAH Mixon-Webster is dead and weaponless. A fortuitous echo sucking air out, a shrunk mouth portal shrilling its sole evidence of event, a darkening, and all at once, snow. All right, thank y'all. Sorry again for some of the little difficulties. It probably had to be crazy to watch my face go through all that stuff and not be able to hear what I was saying.
Oh, man, thank you for that. You know, you so cold with it. I'm not even sure to come on when you say come on, because I'm not sure the performance. Am I part of the performance now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you gave me that Lux vibe in the middle, though. I was like, is it sound?
Man.
You know what I mean?
Oh, that's a big one, man.
Yo, that's a compliment, you know?
Yeah, that's a compliment.
Family, thank you for your work. Thank you for Stereotype. Thank you for going back in there into a work that was already super sound and making it resonate differently, right? I didn't want to start here, but I want to start, JONAH, asking you two questions that are based in Flint. because of the last piece that you did, which is also the last piece in the book, based on actual events, the attempt to survive the apocalypse. So, you know, I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, grew up in the 80s and 90s, and growing up in Jackson, when we heard of Flint, it was two things we heard of. We heard them niggas up there don't play, and we heard them niggas up there play, like they ball, like, you know. So it was like, brothers up there you don't mess with Flint, but also, bruh, it's, you know, we were taught to, like, brothers up there play ball. We fast forward to the mid, 2010s, I guess that's what we're calling it, and the world that is interested knows Flint now for a quote unquote water crisis. I'm interested in how the world's perception of your home changed not just your work, but your work practice and your relationship to sound at all.
That's a great question. Yeah, thank you, brother. Man, so crazy because, like, now everybody knows where that is. Like before, like, yeah, you like little pockets, people here know, yeah, I heard about Flint, like, oh yeah, I didn't heard about, yeah, what I'm saying, you had this, here and there. But now everybody knows. Right. No matter who I talk to, people who don't even live in America, people, people in Africa, like, my brothers and sisters out in Africa, when I went to go visit, like, oh, Flint, yeah, the water crisis. I'm like, yeah, y'all know about it here in Africa, right? Too, and so it, to be honest, it kind of, it raised the stakes for me as far as like what the work was supposed to represent. And, I didn't, it was always that very terse, field, and that practice of, not recapitulating some of the same narratives, right? But at the same time, still trying to have to tell the truth about the tragedy of it, right? And to be honest, like in the work, I kind of had to throw my hands up and say, I have to put this thing out here. I have to put this thing out here, and I can't make it beautiful. This is one story about Flint that I cannot make beautiful. I can make a lot of other stories beautiful about Flint. I can talk about the culture. I can talk about, like the culture of sports and the culture of of music and artistry that came out. Flint produced, just amazingly talented people, right? Despite the circumstances. But I couldn't make that beautiful. I couldn't make that story about Flint beautiful. Wow. And I had to just, not try to resist that by, trying to imbue like, well, this is how the resistance played it. And I didn't even want to tell the story of resistance, right? Because now the narrative has kind of been, oh, the people in Flint, they're just so resilient. Right. Right. As if people in Flint are superhuman. No, they're just human. Like they're not resilient, they're human. Right. Right. They're just dealing with what they had to deal with. And so I think if anything, it was like trying to really humanize even more that kind of story, right? Because in a lot of ways, whether it's from the violence or whether it's from the sports or from the art, whether it's the Flint water crisis, it's this weird little perception that people in Flint are just above normal somehow. Right. Right. They're extra violent. Right. They're extra talented at sports. Right. They're extra resilient. Right. And so, yeah, thank you for that question, because that really was a struggle trying to, go back in the work and say, well, where's the beauty at, Jonah? You're not telling the whole story about Flint, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I'm like, this is one story about Flint that I can't make it beautiful.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting, Fim, that you would say you can't make that story about Flint beautiful, because so much of your work literally like is writing into and around the idea, the reality, and the concept of death. Like the word death appears in so much of your work, and you not only make those ruminations beautiful, you make us hear those ruminations. We see those ruminations. Like there's not many senses in those of us who have all of our senses that aren't touched by your work of making the dead beautiful / comic. But there's something about the water crisis. Do you think it's that you haven't been able to sit in it long enough to make it beautiful, or do you feel like it will never need to be made beautiful?
I think that's a good question. I mean, it's probably a little bit of both. I experienced some of the, the way people came together, and the huge amount of like access to resources that people were able to get for a little while. I mean, that was beautiful to see. People were, it was beautiful to see the anger. Yeah. Right. The anger of it was beautiful to me. right? The not just like the resilience, but people being pissed off. That was gorgeous.
Right.
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 And so I think that was maybe the mode that I was more so kind of fixated on. You know, I'm like, how is the anger towards this, and not just a straight up acquiescence by the people, right?
Yeah.
You know, because that's what we didn't get that in Flint, and Flint ain't gonna give you that. You know, Flint ain't gonna give you acquiescence like that. You know, it's gonna push against, you know what I'm saying, whatever it got to push against, even if it's itself, you know, or the people, you know, like I think, you know, like kind of like that double duty, right? Of like, yeah, I have to tell this very sometimes straight, and I have to do it in different rhetorical modes, right? I have to give you a little bit of reportage. I have to give you a little bit of kind of conceptual organization, right? I have to stage the facts, right? I have to copy and paste documents, right, into the book, right? I can't, you know, I didn't touch that at all, right? But I always felt like the only way that I could really capture some of the beauty and the anger, some of the beauty that did come from the resistance, not the resilience, right? Resilience is something different, right? Resilience and resistance, two different things.
Yeah.
But the resistance to it, right, I found beautiful. Right, the anger towards it, I found beautiful. And so, but some of those things could only really be captured in different modes. I didn't know if I could always get that through in language, maybe through a performance. I could, you know, you can see the anger, feel the anger, you can feel the resistance to it, rather. But that's why I started doing some photo documentary kind of work where, you know, like, you know, you would see people, you know, like crowded up together, you know, either trying to get water or trying to get food, or people crowded up, you know, carrying water from one place to another place, right? And actually being a community. Right. The community part of it, you know, but it was hard to render that in language, right? That part of it. But yeah, no, that's a great question. That's an intense question.
Yeah.
Thank you,
man. You know, I'm thinking a lot, like every time I read you, I see and hear and feel you. I think about, you know, when I was growing up in Jackson, and the few times we were given poetry, it wasn't poetry that was written by us or really for us, or actually like to us. But so all my people rhymed, but we didn't write poetry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested, and you know, one of the things that we talk about off when we're not in front of people is we go back and forth about URL, about battle rap.
Right.
And I'm much older than you. And so for me, fam, like I'm interested in how you grew up in Flint. I want to know what the story is about how you come to poetry, but you decide that your poetry needs to be performed, heard, smelt, felt a little differently than the generic kinds of poetry that some of us were taught in school. Like every Jonah performance is a fucking full body performance. But I'm interested in like, what did home have to do with making that so?
Wow, that's an intense question. Really, it got to go back to when I was a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like for something like getting outed and outcasted at 9 years old, all I could do was read and write.
Yeah.
And I got like really just fascinated with like just the mystery of things, right? Like how did this stuff happen? Like I think at early age, I kind of knew. I'm like, something about this is just really strange, right? This experience of living, right? Period. Right. You know, it's really strange. And then it got even more stranger when I'm like, oh wow, I'm living in a racialized and sexualized embodiment, right? And then like, okay, this is even more strange. And so that's when it kind of started, and I was really just holed up, and I think it was because I was so boxed in, like even physically boxed in, right? You know, I couldn't perform certain ways. Like if I performed a certain way, I was a target, right? If I performed a certain way, I was safe,
right?
And so like a lot of what I learned just through experience when it comes to how we perform in society, you know, how we perform our individual selves in society really informed the way I think about performance now, as far as, right, how can I actually, you know, get into something like to actually enact some of these performances that teeter between the lines of danger and safety. Yeah. Right. Performances that I was not able to, you know, to kind of, you know, express before. Right. And so when I was around 16 years old, that's when I remember I was going to Flint Northern, you know, I was in creative writing class. By that time, I wasn't writing as much, but I remember Charlene Taylor, the teacher of that creative writing class. We was watching, watching Def Poetry Jam, reading Langston Hughes, and all of those. I'm like, wow, okay, there's a different mode, right, of poetry that can really exist beyond, or can really be more visceral, right? It can be way more deeply felt, and I can get some of that emotions out. And so I remember the first time I started trying to do this, so I got up in front of the whole class, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna read this. As I sit here with my tools at hand, my eyes shut, as I began to feel my emotions course through my veins and out of my pen, and and everybody laughed at me. So I was like, oh damn, so like, even because being a poet, writing, doing poetry wasn't cool. It was right. But even that as a performance, it kind of allowed me to access a kind of freedom that I just hadn't had before. I hadn't had over a decade or about a decade, right? Just because I was already so close, so boxed in, and knowing that I had to, walk a straight and narrow line through the north side if I wanted to, get some of that heat off me. Yeah. And I hate to say it, 20 years later, I'm 33 now, the heat is still there. Wow. They still talk about me. They still like, oh yeah, he is. Oh, don't kick it with him, man. He like this. Or don't do, you know what I'm saying? And so I had to find these really stereotypical ways of performing myself or being myself, in order to kind of just to pass. Yeah. Right. And then so in the poems, in the performances and in the poems, it gave me a wider range of performances or approaches, right, to expressing like just the complex, ambivalent, experiences of our embodiments, right? These different embodiments, and what follows.
And just listening to you, I think that there is a super thin line between being outed and being outcasted. But I wonder for you if you can tease out that line for us at all, or if they are the same thing for you.
I think at that moment, in that particular instance, it was together, right? That was synonymous. I think in a lot of ways, though, I think it's just some weird kind of proclivity for society, both like kind of mainstream, I think even like, subculture, minority, societies, to always want to suss out someone, right? We always want to find the culprit, right? We're always trying to find, someone to admonish, right? Or admonish against, right? Which, for whatever reason, right? Good or bad reasons, right? Somebody, you have to do that. You have to suss out, okay, who's the race traitor, right? Right, in the group, right? And so I think it's that history of having to suss out things, or suss out someone who could possibly threaten the longevity or just the very nature of the community itself became an experience and a kind of a different type of tradition, right? That I started kind of wanting to play around with. And even like certain performances, like, when I get to doing that real stereotypical, parody of Black Wayne's, ooh, I guess you can still be anything you want, her, sir. Yeah. And like, it's a way in which I'm outing, a certain performance, or some people might like, oh, that's a outdated, or one performance or a person that should be outcasted, right? They're a threat to our civility. Right, that we think about, how we might think of a kind of a Black civility in this point, or when I go in and I'm doing the stuff and I'm talking about some of the queer experiences that I've had, right, kind of outing myself, it was it's another one where it's like, oh dang, well, you talking about how he, what I'm saying, was kicking it with a gangbanger on some lovey stuff, like what, yeah. Like.
That's an incredible piece, man. That's an incredible piece right there.
Man, I appreciate it. I appreciate you, bro. Yeah, but I think that fine line is really interesting because there have been some ways where the outing leading to the outcasting, but I think the outcasting issue itself is just it's its own tradition, right? Yeah. That kind of like two separate traditions, right? And I can't tell you because I got outed. I got outed again when I was, 16, you know, somebody passing a note to me in class, like, oh yeah, I know you gay, blah, 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 blah. Or, you know, I'm trying to go to college for the first time. People finding stuff like, oh yeah, I heard he is gay, you know. So it's just a series of being outed all the time.
Yeah.
And with that, sometimes it was like, sometimes I did get outcasted. Sometimes I would get approached. Right. So it wasn't always like that, right? But I think that fine line you speak of is, I think it's very conditional. It's very based in context, right?
Yeah.
And it's based quite heavily on the power dynamics of those who can witness or who can actually point out, right, and what power they have, right, to then persuade others, right, to dissociate from that person. But yeah, it is a fine line.
I love that answer, fam. That's yeah, we're gonna have to record. We're gonna have to talk about that. That was a good answer. You rock that shit. But I want to get specific about a few pieces, and then I want to make sure we make time for the questions. So y'all, like, please put your questions in the question and answer section down here to your right, and we're gonna get to as many of them as possible. Hopefully, all of them. But I want to talk about specific pieces, fam. So there's a piece, The Ghost of Richard Pryor Made Me Do It, and it ends with, I tighten with every giggle from the crowd. And then I think about the end of the first piece, which ends with, I'm still not all deaf. And so I want to talk about your desire to play with the comic in very fucking provocative ways, like all throughout the joint. Like the death is being played with. I mean, in the Richard Pryor joint, I tighten with every giggle from the crowd. I mean, you're playing with the comic and laughter, but you're showing us, I think, explicitly how that laughter is often tied to death. And then in the first piece, it starts something, I'm still not all death. So I wonder if you can talk about, this ties into, I think, some of what you're doing with the blues, like the importance of the comic in thinking and feeling about death, and the importance of the comic being multi-layered. Like the comic is not just one color, right? Like there's many different shades of blue in the comic. But I wonder if you can talk about that in your work a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and it's so funny, you know, you bring up that piece, you know, Richard Pryor actually haunts this book, you know, like, so a lot of time when I was working on Stereotypes, like since 2014, I was plumbing the depths of every kind of iteration and deployment of the N word I could find. And of course, you know, this nigga's crazy was one of the most influential kind of experiments, you know, and it really does, you know, so Glenda L. Carpio wrote Laughing Fit to Kill. Changed my life.
Word.
Changed my life. I'm gonna write it in here. Yeah. Laughing Fit to Kill. And it actually has a cut on the cover. Richard Pryor's on the cover of this book. And one thing that kind of really struck me and what Carpio kind of suggests, and I think what Richard Pryor also kind of philosophizes, you know, is this extreme kind of sublime encounter with the absurd, right? Yeah. And that's where the comedy, something comedic happens, right? That's where and a lot of times that absurdity has a lot to do with trauma and tragedy, right? But there's a little turn that happens, right? And I think this is what, you know, the form of, you know, even, you know, this is what the form of the Dozens, battle rap, and also just jokes, what it does, right? It finds that little turn, and also the blues too, right? And I kind of call all of these forms as like participating in what I call the poetics of the iterative, trying to always change and reassign new meanings, right? And always doing that kind of a, you know, that ameliorating kind of thing, right? And also, you know, you got to think about some of those other proverbs and that, you know, laughing to keep from crying type things, right? Because when you're face to face with something that's so absurd, like being called a nigga by a white man, that's absurd. Right. At this point, you know, like now it's absurd. This context, you know, it was always absurd, to be honest, right? Mm-hmm. It was absurd from beginning to end. Right. Mm-hmm. But in that absurdity, where is that kind of that real critical awareness, that there is a kind of another layer that's operating that maybe could possibly give freedom, or maybe could possibly give maybe not even freedom, but even like a respite, right? A break from the absurd, right? And somewhere in that break and in that turn is just true hilarity, right? So like in one of the first pieces in the book, which actually quotes Richard Pryor's joke, right? Now what nigga feel like having fun after all that, right? And it's like, and that like, right, that's true. What nigga feel like, who want to go have fun after you just been, assailed by a cop, or just had a white man, like pretty, diminish your dignity, but then at the same, and then that joke finishes in a terrible way. Like, you don't have fun, you go home, you beat your wife and your kids, and it's like, right, and so it's like that really staunch truth, right? And I think that's really where it's really, I think that's that break is truth, right? Right. And somewhere when that truth gets up into that encounter with the absurd, right? It's like, oh wow, this makes no sense, and that the nonsensical element of that experience is really what kind of produces that response, right? Even if it's like awkward laughter or nervous laughter, right? And it's a very bewildering human reaction, I think. And so when we get to the Ghost of Richard Pryor made me do it, and I'll tell the story about how I snatched the white man by his shirt and I wrapped his shirt into my fist. Right. That was funny.
It's funny.
Everybody thought it was funny.
Right.
Then they bought me a shot afterward. That was a real story. Having a real bar. I mean, but it was just so absurd. And even like the absurdity of death. Death is absurd. All right. Yes. In a lot of ways, we might think it's perfunctory, we might think it's obligatory, but it's actually quite absurd.
It is, man. It is.
Very mysterious. Yeah. Very unknowable. Right. Very, like, what do we do with it? Right. Despite the truth that we know of it. And then,
I wonder if we can talk a bit about really some of this, but also beginnings and ends, because like when I read so much of your work on the page, I just see so many possibilities, as an essayist and a fiction writer. I'm like, oh shit, like this would be the incredible beginning of something. But what you'll do often is you'll end the piece with that. So like, for example, in The Ugliest Nigga I Know is the ugliest nigga I've seen. The last bit, this ends the poem, right? So I want y'all to hear this as the ending of the piece, but also think about it as the beginning of a short story or piece of fiction. Once a whole school bus full of fifth graders clapped and sang Parliament Flashlight, because light-skinned Brittany said his big forehead reflected like the sun. Obviously enough, a flashlight, that nigga ain't say a word. Let me read it again. Once a whole school bus of fifth graders clapped and sang Parliament Flashlight, because light-skinned Brittany said his big forehead reflected like the sun. Like, obviously enough, a flashlight, and that nigga ain't say a word. When I read that, fam, I was like, this feels like the beginning, but it comes in at the end of the piece. And I'm interested in like restraint. Like, how do you write such like a lush line that in some way, even if it's in verse, like begs, or that the reader is going to want to know what happens next, right? To light-skinned Brittany, to Parliament Flashlight, that utterance. How do you know when to stop a piece like that, especially when it quote unquote ends so bombastically?
I think there's another thing too, right? Trying to find like that volta. I'm always trying to find like that last note to strike when it's like, I want the reader to feel as speechless sometimes as, as that figure in the poem, felt, and I think again, it's like, being faced with, that is absurd. Like, why would, I mean, it's not that absurd. If anybody ever, took the bus, you're going to get cracked on. You're going to get cracked on. Somebody, you're going to be everybody got their turn, everybody gets a turn to get cracked on. But to actually have an entire school, like literally the whole flashlight, and now I can't even hear that song the same anymore, and it's like, and the thing about at that moment, like how speechless I was left. And I'm like, and how much of that experience was kind of a little bit ineffable for me, right? It's like that, the contrast between, right, silence and noise, right? So, you know, like every time, like, you know, when I get to like those, that the ending of a thing, it's always trying to hit this weird, ambivalent, maybe counterintuitive, very tense relationship, right? Between two things. You know, there's another piece when in the figurative, I respond, "This be killing me," when, you know, the last lines are, you know, damn, they got the hood and white folk looking for the same nigga.
Right.
Like,
right.
and like,
right.
So how to create these really ambivalent like tensions, right? And that's the final note, right? And it's like, there's no real true resolution. It's just tension. Right.
Feel that.
Right. Some kind of thematic tension or some kind of, you know, a tension of a tense image, right? Things that are kind of polar opposites, kind of leaning and bumping against each other. Yeah. So, but at the same time, you know, that same tension does create an opening, right? And in some of the ways, I think, I don't know, is that the poem? Yeah. So, Ugliest Nigga I Know is Ugliest Nigga I Seen, and when it gets to the end, you know, and that nigga ain't say a word, the next poem you get isn't a word. It's actually a picture. It's a self-portrait.
Right.
Yeah, you know, of what I like, my childhood self-portrait, right? Like, oh, this is what I look like to myself, right? Because of the way others look at me.
Yes.
Right. And so, yeah, exactly right. You know, it's that, you know, it is a kind of, you know, the endings aren't a foreclosure at all. It actually, you know, is to take us to take, you know, that experience and show how it kind of permutates right throughout a trajectory of one's identity or selfhood, right? It's like, you know, like it's the same thing, like every experience that we have, even though it seemed like, oh, that relationship is over or this person's gone now, it actually is just a start of a whole nother thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. I've been wanting to ask you this question, fam, since we met, and we should say, you know, when the night we met, it was destined to be a special night, because not only did I get to hear and see your work for the first time, but we were in the presence of, like, you know, two people whose bodies and spirits mean the world to both of us. You know, Nabila was right there, and Derek was right there. The same faith, man. Like, and whenever we do stuff like that, like, I don't ever want to do shit because with the poets, because, you know, y'all too good at that shit. Y'all use that small amount of space too good. Motherfuckers like us got to try to build tension and all that bullshit. But anyway,
I wasn't coming after you. You killed everybody.
You crushed it. But one of the things you did is you came up there. I don't even know if you remember the performance or not, but like, you came up there and you made yourself look dusty, you know, like ashy, right? And then there's this poem. There's this piece in the book. The real nigga mimics his right hand, and one of the lines is, "And why else would a nigga's hands be this ashy?" And another line, and then later on you refer to like dusty knuckles. So like, I it's like when you see somebody do something that's so dope, even though you talk to them, you don't want to seem like a stand and shit. So like, you don't add. But now I have an occasion to ask you. But fam, talk to me about the way you spin dustiness. Like into, like, of course, like a remembrance of the archaic, but it also, again, the reverberations of it feel so forward landing, right? So I mean, I think you're always speaking to something in our experiences as Black folk in this nation that are like, you know, we know dustiness, right? And we know how to outcast dustiness, but we also have a value for dustiness, even in our lexicon, how we speak. And even I think there's a value, like, I think we think dustiness means like somebody's been working hard or blah, 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 blah. But I want to know how you like feel and think dustiness, and what makes you like manifest that piece like you manifested that night, like literally like putting your body on a stage looking dusty.
Yeah, you know, it's it's funny. It's you know, I really do try to get that full body performance, and that's a crazy. I wanted to do that piece tonight, but I ain't had no baby powder or no flour. But I know Mama could tell you, I came down, I did it one time. I'm like, Mama, we got some flour or something.
Oh, I
had to put my ass in that bag of flour. But yeah, but you know, and that poem came from is one. So I used to in the summers, I used to work on houses to make, you know, the stipend was over. So in the summer, I'd get back to working on houses, and I'd be, you know, doing drywall or painting and stuff like that. And I would just be covered in, you know, dust, like literal, actual dust, you know. And then just the whole issue of like just being ashy in general, right? You know, has always been kind of like you know, one, I think that would also warrant outcasting, I guess, in a sense. And, you know, light-skinned Brittany used to call me Dusty back in the day, too. Like, light-skinned Brittany used to terrorize me. And there wasn't why we called her light-skinned Brittany, because it was a white Brittany, it was a light-skinned Brittany. That's how we differentiated the two. When we was in elementary school, yeah. And, you know, I used to always come in Dusty. Another poem, light-skinned Brittany asks, what happened? Your mama hit the lottery or something? Because you had never had Nautica before. She did. She did. And the answer was yes, she did.
Yeah.
And so, and like those moments, right, going from like being a child and like, you know, going to school musty sometimes, going to school, you know, ashy, you know, being picked on for that. And then how that paralleled as an adult, like walking around, you know, going in, I'm like, yeah, I'm a little unkempt right now, you know, you know, and then somebody said, you look like money to me.
Wow.
That's where that turn,
Wow.
right? That's where that turn, that switch happened. I'm like, oh, how can I activate that?
Wow.
How can I activate that and then deploy that through this history of Black labor in the country, right?
Yeah.
And then so that's how we get to the, you know, Dusty Knuckles is a good hunch.
Right.
Say pocket money, say back rent, say a chicken in the pot, say. Now look at boss. Now my hand's just as white as yours, right? And so like to find that turn, that slip, right, where we kind of like can defamiliarize ourselves with that lexicon itself, right? And what can activate that, you know, and thinking about what rhetorical shifts can activate that. So when I slip into that voice and it slips from being, you know, I've been working all day, I've been working on the railroad, you know, so I'm thinking about that stuff, right? And it's thinking about, you know, how that counterintuitive gaze of this person looks like, right? They haven't, you know, put no lotion, or they haven't washed up, or they covered in paint, they covered in soot, or they covered in something, right? Actually is indicative of a larger history of labor and a larger kind of idea of commodity and commerce.
Yeah.
And so that was something I was trying to suss out, you know, through that poem. In this, like, you know, working so much that you get ashy and turn into a white man.
Right. Man, it's I mean, you know this, but it's just amazing work. It's amazing work. And it's also amazing the way I feel like the book reteaches us how to read it. Like, especially with the addition of the Flint section, right? Which makes it a completely different book, right? Like near the end, like it makes us read. Like I'm constantly like rereading the poems that came before it, trying to find not just the narrative, but like, you know, the hollows and the holes, because it creates so many different holes. Let's make sure we get these folks who've been here in the chat. If you have any more questions, y'all, make sure you put them in there. Okay, so
because we will keep talking.
I'm just looking at the schedule and realize we're a little bit behind. But how did you nourish? Karina asks, how did you nourish / fortify yourself and your practice while moving through the making of this work? Karina,
I didn't.
Yeah,
I did not.
You didn't.
I didn't. You know, you know, like one of the reasons why that book almost killed me is because I had to really just embody, like, and just think about, you know, like where does this kind of like weird death drive come from? Yeah. Right. Well, like all these, every turn of, you know, some Black experiences is just, you know, just so close to death all the time. And so it was like, I had to just, you know, let that be the state that I was in order to write some of this stuff, you know, in order to even like see, like if I can really just go deep and not take care of myself, not bathe, smoke too much, drink too much, right, you know, be in places I should not be in. Right. It's like method acting in a way. It was like real intense form of method acting. Yeah. To get some, you know, being in a trap and listen to these stories, you know what I'm saying? Going to, oh yeah, you know, they're trapping out, you know, over off of Parkway. So I'm gonna sit, you know what I'm saying? And I'm going to take in like the language that comes out there, the hood news, you know, and then represent that. right? As an actual report, as actual journalism, or going in real, or the other part, which was I had to realize how often a gun is present around me.
Yeah.
That was one of the things, or how many times a gun had been pulled out on.
Right.
So, and that just kind of became the way in which I tried to look up and out through some of these very stereotypical, impositions and positions, right? And also something interesting, the body when the body is in a certain position, it knows something, right? I always kind of think about like the b-boy stance. When I was in a b-boy stance, the body is very informed, and it actually is informing at the same time, right? When you do like, what's up there? You know what I'm saying? The body is very active in its knowledge of, of its context, right? When it's in certain positions, right? Even it's positions of danger, right? The body knows, and the body responds, and the body positions itself, right? Certain kind of ways. And I was interested about that. I was just like, what does the body know when it's in these situations and in these positions? And so during that, there was no nourishment. Any nourishment that came was just like kicking it and hanging out and having a good time. It was like the communal nourishment, right? People feeding into, people feeding into you kind of thing. That's a good question. People ask me about, self-care when it comes to writing this book. It's like, it's so this, it's so that. But that's how it was, when I did go back to Flint and learning, like, and retraining myself, like, oh, don't put that toothbrush under the faucet. You can't do that no more, right? And then my body had to learn not to make that action, right? And how the everyday was resituated, right, in that context. Learning, okay, my body knows what it feels like to carry 3 cases of water at one time.
Yeah,
my body knows what it feels like to, get on the line and, throw water cases and stack them up and try to, put them in people's trunks. Like, hey, you good? You got some water? All right, So it's really interesting, especially thinking about the issue of the fact that, and I wasn't drinking water. I literally, I stopped drinking water, like, because it was always something with the damn water. If it wasn't the tap water, it'd be like, well, the chemicals in the plastic, if the water bottle's been sitting too long, the chemicals in the plastic seeped into the water. I'm like, damn, you can't drink the bottled water neither. Or then, it was one situation where a bunch of water was found. It was like got flooded or something like that. And like they was trying to like pass it out or whatever. It was like just nasty stuff like that was going on. I'm like, oh no, there almost is no way out, right? I guess the only thing I could really nourish me was just like listening to blues tracks, and because the blues is trying to find that turn all the time. So even hang around blues when it gets to that section, like that one part where and Angie Fisher she just sang her face off and she got to that part.
Bruh, yeah.
And she said, like, now imagine if they never would have cut me down.
Right.
And that double voicedness, right? So I think the only thing that really nourished me was like knowing that there's double meanings all the time. So, and everything wasn't so static.
Let me ask this question, because this is just a follow-up to that, because I wrote this memoir, and people often ask me, how do you take care of yourself? And like you, I say often that I did not. But what you just did is you flipped it, which is like you didn't, but you're like, I didn't because the work necessitated I did not. And you're also a teacher. And one of the things I think we have to do now that we should have been doing 15, 20 years ago as teachers, but definitely now, when we're in these classrooms and students are writing into things that might be hard and hurtful to them, I think we're often encouraged to see how they are, right? Like, write what you're ready to write, don't hurt yourself. But how do you as a teacher handle that part of what we do when you yourself know that sometimes you have to hurt and be harmed to create work that has the integrity and the volume that you want it to have?
I'm gonna try to answer this without getting too off on a whole different subject.
Okay.
Because a lot of it has to do with the way we train teachers to teach, right? And the way we kind of, and the way we bring our experiences of life into the classroom, and that weird kind of double thing. So one thing that I really kind of like stuck out to me first as I think about this is like, so it's actually it's a framework of kind of like teaching philosophy, like of andragogy. I hate the word pedagogy. I think pedagogy is antiquated. I think it's dead. Actually, not even just, it's not dead. It's just, it's out of context. It's used out of context. Pedagogy, literally, you can hear it in the language, pediatrics, but it's about teaching kids. Andragogy though, right, which is a kind of different framework. And I think I really used and thought about in making them work and teaching some of this stuff. Andrew got you thinking about, like, how do we teach adults, right? And that's a different framework. Adults learn and uptake information differently, right? And they apply it and they want to apply it differently, right? So some principles of like andragogy is, people have to know why they're learning what they're learning, right? And they also have to know that it has immediate application. You can apply what you're learning immediately, right? As opposed to when we teach kids, like, you're going to use this down the line. There's the paradigm shifts, right? We're thinking about how we teach adults, and we're teaching ourselves, right? And how we retain information. And so when I'm kind of going through this work, I'm like, okay, what is the immediate application of what I'm experiencing? How can I apply this immediately the next time I walk out my door? How can I apply this immediately the next time I step in front of a classroom? And how those things actually are a little bit more contiguous than they might seem.
Right.
And so I think thinking from that framework, trying to produce this work, trying to teach at the same time, it's like, you have to kind of get really unabashed about the things you will experience, right? In the ways that we have to really just be always aware of, like, the context that we're in all the time, always. And that's why I always fall back on. It's like, it's context, all this context, right? You have to be able to suss out who, what, when, where, why, and how at any given point in time.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's a common thread that happens in the classroom, happens in the street, right? And so thinking about that, it's like, all right, this is how I am understanding how I'm entering this work and how I'm exposing myself to these experiences, or re-exposing myself to these experiences. And also at the same time, how when I step in front of a class, I'm also trying to make students grossly aware of the context that they're in.
Right.
Right. Even to the very fundamental thing, right? The original context of being in the body, right? I asked them, so since we know this is the context, what can we expect? Right. You have to eat, you have to go to sleep, right? And so that same kind of contextual, digging or analysis has to happen all the time, right? Even when you're at home, when you go out into the world, when you get stuff in front of the classroom, when you're trying to impart a kind of framework or a way of applying things. Yeah. Did I answer the question? I hope I didn't get too far off. No, you too far off.
No, you did answer. And I think that this question, one of the question just came in, actually can give you space to go into it a little bit more. And then I want to end with Chamara. I don't know if her name is Chamara or.
Oh, is that Chamara?
Yeah, Chamara. Okay, so I want to end with Chamara's question, but this question just came in and it's sort of tied, and it gives you opportunity to go into that resistance thing you talked about earlier. I'm so thankful for this conversation and the way you conjure Marlon Riggs and so many Black feminists of color, a la The Bridge, Call My Back, especially around the distinction between resistance and resilience. Giving me a lot of post-Katrina feelings. Can you please dig deeper into the problems with the idea of resilience and how it's used?
It's used to make people, it's used to ignore people. Oh, they're resilient, that'll be all right. Right? That's when the first thing off the cuff. When I think, oh, those are resilient. Oh, they're so resilient.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Do anything.
Right. Well, they're all right. They're resilient. What do they need from me? They're already resilient.
Right.
Right. I think that's one of the first kind of off the cuff response, kind of connotations or kind of maybe impression that I think the word resilience has when it's used, socially, right? Its utility is oftentimes used to neglect and ignore people. Right. Oh, they're so resilient. They don't need no more donations. They're good. They don't need shit, right? Because they're resilient, right? And in that way, right? I think we face another kind of absurdity, right? And it's like, what are we trying to suggest even when we use the word resilient, right? Resilient to me has to do with more so with matter. Like steel is resilient, iron is resilient, concrete's resilient, right? Humans aren't resilient, they're human.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
We just go through, we just go through it. We just experience it. We try to make the best out of it, right? We try to, we just try to survive, it's
Right.
back to like issues of survival, right? I equate resistance to that same conundrum of being, of survival, right? Survival is just survival. It's not living, it's not thriving, right? It's literally being there, staying there, right? So, right, that's what I'm thinking about. I hear the word resilient, I'm thinking about that's a word you use for an infrastructure, not a people.
Right, human.
Right.
Right.
And so like it's another kind of like wrong context, right? Like people in New Orleans, they weren't resilient. The levees weren't even resilient. Right. Those people were people.
Yeah.
Right. They were human. Right. And it's hard to resist, both natural disaster and then also the disaster of man-made neglect. It's hard to, sometimes resist some of those things the same way, it was hard for people in Flint, how do you resist or, these policies, right, that were made to literally kill you, and literally get you out of a place. So I think, I hope as the cello, thank you for that question too. Yeah, but I think that's it. And I also we see the same thing when it has to do with gender and also other kind of queer identities, right? Like trans people, they're not resilient. You see a trans person walking out there, doesn't mean they're resilient.
Right.
Right. They're human. Right. They're not material.
Yeah. When I was in this last book I wrote, I was writing about the Black women I grew up, my mama, my aunties, Black women in my community. And I wrote that, we were taught as young Black boys that the Black women that we knew were always going to be okay, which meant we never had to give a fuck if they were going to be okay. Right. Like there's something so dangerous in thinking people are going to make it, because then you're categorically thinking you don't have to think about whether or not they make it or what you do to make their way harder. So yeah, I feel that. I like that distinction you made. All right, I wanted to give you the opportunity.
I wanted to say the little thing because this just hit me, but because you just hit me because my grandma, she had 8 daughters. My mom was 4, so like that's a major one. And like right now, what kind of just came to me, right, is the major difference that I think really between the resistance and the resilient thing has to do with this agent-patient relationship, right? When you're resilient, you're a patient, right? You have to. You have to just kind of, let the thing happen to you, right? Yeah. When you're an agent, right, you actually have agents. When you're being resistant, you have agency, right? Yeah. And so I think that's one of the major distinctions. Yeah, I want to drop that off. I just thought about that.
I like that. All right, let's take it home with this one. Chamar Moore. Thinking about how you embody this performance with the very audacity of Blackness. How do you think embodiment and sexuality inform your art and your performance?
Yeah, it's that's a great. Thank you, Dr. Moore. Dr. Mo. But if I do this without getting emotional. I can't do it. All right, so man, this book is for me when I was a little kid. That shit hurt so bad. And so in doing some of these things as they're kind of informed by, issues, identity issues of, both race and sexuality, it's like, gotta live my life. My mama said this to me when I was really going through it. When I was in my early 20s. She said, just live your life, baby.
Just live your life.
Just live your life, baby. And in a lot of ways, this, so where I'm working, on the page, I'm working, in the body, I'm just trying to live my life.
I feel
And that's really, I don't know if that seems too simplistic but that's really just, what it is, you know, and how, and hopefully, right, if, you know, through seeing some of those performances, you know, if anybody can also be, if anybody, everybody can be, especially, you know, with Black folks and queer folks, and they can be even more emboldened to just live their life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's where some of the audaciousness, kind of the audacity, you know, kind of comes in, you know, and, you know, like, you know, performances are so bombastic, like, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm alive. You want to hear me, you want to see me.
Yeah.
You're going to feel me.
You're going to live. You're going to live.
And we'll live.
Right.
Yep.
And that, again, to speak to, for y'all who have not yet read Stereotype, you please need to do it. That sentiment complemented with like the various textures of depth that we get in this book just creates a depth, fam, that is no doubt unrivaled. It's yours. You know, it's you know, we talk rap talk a lot, fam. You got the Jonah lane. The Jonah lane is yours. You got, it's limitations out there, but you know, that's your, and part of living, I think, as I see it through your work, is finding, like, making lanes, like, in your own identity, making lanes in your own communities. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not loving yourself or your communities, right, but like, it's there to be made different, right? Like, exactly. It's just supposed to be made different when we leave here. So, I just want to say, you know, I love you deeply. Your work, love you, brother. Thank you so much. Want to create, fam, and spin, and they gave us time to listen and talk to each other and play. So I just want to thank
that was great. Yeah, I know things have been crazy. Thank you, brother. You know, I'm gonna cry in the car, but you know, it's gonna be good. I appreciate you. You know, thank you so much. I love you so much, man. And there's no other. I knew. I was like, when they would say, you know, you want to do an event, you know, and I'm like, there's only one person to think of that I want to do this event with me. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get Derek on here too. You know, that's the brother. You know, we
we got to
y'all, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
yeah. You know, but I couldn't get that. Couldn't get Derek on this one, but we're gonna do it again. But thank you for, you know, just bringing more of the truth out of me, like you bring more of the truth out of all of us. So you know, appreciate you for that, man. God bless you.
Love, man. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you. And I appreciate that comment about resilience, because it drives me crazy. But also, Kiese, you know, about the comment about infrastructure, it makes me just wonder if they just thought Black folks were infrastructure, right? We're not people, we are infrastructure, which is why we can be resilient. Absolutely. Without no thought of our humanity.
Okay, now. Come on now, man. But look, we really enjoyed this because you should have been right in there. You should have just jumped on it. Catch the spirit, right?
But no, I mean, this was really phenomenal. So thank you both for moving a provocative, timely, audacious discussion of the many strands, right, that make up the experiences and meditation of Stereotype. I mean, really, it's actually a very beautiful book in terms of how it's actually made. So thank you so much for this. But I also say always grateful to Sharon Harris for her behind the scenes genius as keeping tonight's event moving. And later this week, we will be co-hosting another event. So on Thursday, art historian Uchenna Tam will present Smell Blood on Wengechi Mutu and global contemporary art. Also in November, please join us for conversations about Black aliveness, or the Poetics of Being, by Kevin Quashie, who will be in conversation with Columbia University professors Saidiya Hartman and Robert Gooding Williams. And so for more information on other events in the department, please see our website, afamstudies.columbia.edu, and of course, check out things on our YouTube channel. So thank you to the audience for coming today. And again, thank you, Jonah and Kiese, for a really phenomenal conversations.
Thank you.